So first of all, in critical reasoning, we have assumption kind of questions. There'll be a paragraph, okay, 3-4 lines max, and there'll be some conclusion, okay, based upon some logic or reasoning. And the question will be that in arriving at this conclusion from this reasoning, what assumption was made? Okay, that reasoning led to this conclusion. So what assumption could have been made? That means if that assumption is wrong, the conclusion would be wrong. Or if the assumption is otherwise, the conclusion would be different. So it's the basic premise. This assumption is nothing but basic premise on that conclusion has been made. If that basic premise doesn't exist, the conclusion would be different. So we'll use this approach of negation. Okay, we'll take opposite of what is given in the answer choice, and if that changes the conclusion, definitely that's a right assumption. For example, if you read this small paragraph, the conclusion is that if we get to know when rice and yams were introduced into Western Africa, the earliest date at which agricultural societies could have arisen would be known. Okay, let's see. People in Western Africa did not develop staple crops, so its negation would be they did develop staple crops that they stopped cultivating once rice and yams were introduced. That means if we get to know at what date rice and yams were introduced in Africa, there would be other staple crops that would be cultivated. So that means staple crops mean beginning of agriculture societies. So that means agriculture societies would have existed at an earlier date than the rice and yams date. So this changes the conclusion here. If you see, this is the right option. Let's see others. There are no plants, so let's remove no. There are plants native to Western Africa that, if domesticated, could serve as staple food crops. So it is saying that it's not just rice and yams, it could be some other crops which are native to Africa which could serve as staple crops. But does it talk about the timeline of those crops? Okay, were they before rice and yams or were they after rice and yams? No. So we cannot talk about the timelines here. Rice and yams were grown as staple crops by the earliest agricultural societies outside of Western Africa. Maybe, but how does it change the things within Western Africa? Doesn't tell me. Kola and okra are better than rice and yams. It compares supplemental with staple crops. It doesn't tell me whether other staple crops existed or not. Wrong. Again, kola and okra were domesticated before rice and yams. It already is mentioned in the passage or the paragraph, and again it doesn't tell me whether other staple crops existed before rice and yams. Again out. Read this paragraph and arrive at the conclusion. Conclusion is the most important thing in CR questions. Okay, if you get the wrong conclusion, obviously you get the wrong answer. Okay, and 80% of the situations when you get the right conclusion, you are able to reach at the right options. So the conclusion here is, if the sea levels keep rising, it will displace millions of people living along the coastlines. Okay, so the right option would be that if we negate that option, people will not be required to be displaced. First, new technological developments in the next century will not, so remove not, will divert rising seas from the world's coastal cities. So if they divert the seas from coastal areas, that means rising sea levels will not destroy the population centers along the coastal lines. Okay, so the people will not be displaced. So it changes the conclusion definitely. Second, individuals will not become aware of the steps they take. So individuals will become aware, let's say, But does it stop global warming? Does it stop people getting displaced? No. Rising sea levels similarly affect all the coastal population centers. Let's say its negation will be do not affect. So let's say if it affects half of them, so will it stop people getting displaced? No. Some global warming experts predict a greater than 8 degree Fahrenheit. So let's say they do not predict greater than 8 degree. But if you see, it's between 3 and 8, so that will be good enough to displace the people. Again, out. Human activity is the sole cause of increasing. Let's say human activity is not the sole cause. So whatever other reason is the cause of global warming, so it will rise the sea levels and will displace millions of people. Again, no doubt. Here the conclusion is, combined with oil production, country B produces enough ethanol to meet its demand. So oil production plus ethanol production will be equal to or enough to meet demand. Okay. So let's see, electric power is not a superior alternative. Let's say electric power is a superior alternative to ethanol. Does it tell me whether the production is sufficient for demand or not? Not really. Country B domestic production of ethanol is increasing more quickly than, okay, let's put a note here. It's not increasing more quickly than domestic oil production. Again, the combined production is enough for domestic consumption or not? Doesn't tell me. Ethanol is suitable. Let's say ethanol is not suitable for heating of homes and other applications. So let's say oil is suitable other than ethanol, but will it be sufficient to meet the demand? Not really. Gasoline consumption is not increasing, so let's negate it. Gasoline consumption is increasing at a substantially higher rate than domestic oil and ethanol production. So whatever rate we are increasing, or we are producing oil and ethanol, the consumption is increasing at a faster rate. So that means we'll have to import oil. Okay, so it will not be sufficient to meet the demand. That changes the conclusion. That's your answer. Ethanol is as efficient, is not as efficient, let's say. I mean, in order to negate it, in terms of mileage per gallon, again, does it tell me whether it will be sufficient to meet the demand or not? Not really. Okay, so if you see here, utility companies claim that they'll be able to provide stable energy supplies to all their clients. As one can easily see, these sources will be less risky for utilities than non-renewable sources, whose prices can fluctuate dramatically according to availability. The conclusion is, the renewable sources, they are less risky because their availability does not fluctuate. Okay, let's see. The public will embrace the development of wind and solar power. So if you put a note here, public does not accept, does not embrace. Does it tell me whether the renewable sources would be less risky or would they fluctuate or not? No. No new deposits of gas, oil and coal will be discovered in the near future. Again, does it make the renewable less risky or more risky? Even if we negate it, new deposits would be available, but again, renewable doesn't become less or more risky because of that. Weather patterns are consistent and predictable. Now, the sources of renewable source energy are mainly wind and solar, which is nothing but completely dependent on weather. So if I make it not, if I negate it, weather patterns are not consistent and predictable. That means this might fluctuate, their availability might fluctuate. So if there is no wind, we'll not have wind power. Okay, if we have prolonged winters, we might have less of solar power. So it becomes more risky. That changes the conclusion. Next, the necessary technology for conversion to wind and solar power is not more expensive than the technology. Let's remove the not. Is more expensive than the technology needed to create energy through combustion. So it talks about something being expensive or less expensive or more expensive. Again, does it tell me whether it will fluctuate or not, availability? No. Obtaining energy from non-renewable sources such as gas, oil and coal cannot be made less risky. But again, the non-renewable becoming less or more risky doesn't tell me whether renewable will be less risky or more risky. Again, out. From 1992, illegal harvesting began. In 1996, the legal catch was 9,000 tons lesser. So that 9,000 tons would have been moved to the illegal fishing. That's the thing. Okay, 9,000 tons lesser in legal fishing should have moved to 9,000 tons more in illegal harvesting. First option, compared to 1992 levels, the population of catchable lobsters had not sharply declined. So let's remove this not. So catchable population is declined. Okay, so because the overall population declined, the 9,000 which was lesser in terms of legal catch, maybe it was, or maybe didn't move to the illegal. Maybe let's say the total population declined by 10,000 tons. Let's say. So 9,000 decreased in legal and 1,000 decreased in illegal. So 9,000 decrease in legal doesn't mean a 9,000 increase in illegal. Okay, if this was negated, so it would change the conclusion itself. That's the option. The average annual lobster catch in tons of an outlaw fishing boat has increased. Let's keep it has not increased steadily since 1992. So does it mean it would increase by 9,000 tons by 1996? We cannot say. Okay. Outlaw fishing boats do not as a group harvest more lobster than do licensed boats. So let's remove it. Outlaw fishing boats as a group harvest more lobsters. Does it tell me whether the increase would be 9,000 tons or not? Not really. Annual legal lobster harvest in Bellucia in 1996 was not significantly less than 9,000 ton lids. Let's remove this not. Was significantly lesser than 9,000 tons. Again, does it tell me whether the increase would be 9,000 tons or significantly more than 9,000 tons? We cannot say. A significant proportion of Bellucia's operators of licensed lobster fishing boats went out of business between 1992 and 1996. So the legal fishing boats went out of business. So it explains 9,000 tons. Okay, but it doesn't tell me any which way whether the increase would be 9,000 ton in illegal fishing or not. Okay, or let's say did not went out of business. Okay, so does it explain or does it tell me whether the illegal fishing would be 9,000 tons more or lesser? No. In evaluate kind of questions, so again there will be a paragraph and some conclusion or kind of cause and effect relationship would be there, and we'll be required to check that what will be the most important question that should be asked or that should be answered that will affect the conclusion of the argument. Okay, so most important question should be the one for which if we get opposite answers, you must get opposite conclusions. Okay, we might get conclusion 1 and conclusion 2 if we get opposite answers to that particular question. Only in that case it becomes the important question. Okay, if opposite answers to the question doesn't give me opposite conclusions, then the question is not relevant or it's not important. So that's strategy we'll pick here. So it says, George Orwell's book 1984 seems to have exercised a lot of influence on many intellectuals. 1,000 readers of the most intellectually stimulating national daily were surveyed and asked to name the one book that had the most influence on their lives. The book chosen most often was the Bible. 1984 was second. Okay, so we surveyed 1,000 readers of one of the most intellectually stimulating national dailies, and so we asked them one book that influenced their lives most. The first one was Bible. So in first place it's Bible. In second place it was 1984. Okay, so the number of people who mentioned Bible was maximum, and the number of people who mentioned 1984 was second highest. That's what it means, okay, in terms of number of people, right? Now let's see how many of those surveyed had actually read the books they chose. Okay, so if we take opposite cases, all those read the books, so does it change 1984 to be the second highest or not? Okay, or does it change the fact that it influenced many people? Let's say none of them read the books. Okay, again, if none of them have read the books, that means those who picked Bible are equally good or equally bad as those who picked 1984. So it doesn't tell me whether many intellectuals were affected or were influenced by the book or not. Out. How many books had each person surveyed read? Maybe they read just 1 or 2 books. Maybe they read 1,000 books. Okay, these are extreme cases we are taking. In both these cases, it doesn't tell me whether 1984 affected their lives or not. Why? Because let's say they've read only 2 books. Okay, so let's say 1984 was one of the books. So they answered that it affected it. So maybe they've read 1,000 other books. So does it tell me it will change their answer? No. Did people speak the truth while answering the survey question? Again, 2 cases. Let's say yes, they spoke the truth, so that's not even a problem. That means 1984 did affect their lives. Second, let's say they did not speak truth. So that means people who mentioned that 1984 did affect their lives, they were wrong. That means some other books might have affected them. So, and the people who did not mention 1984, okay, they mentioned other books, let's say. So out of those, how many would have chosen 1984? We cannot answer that question. So we don't know whether 1984 actually affected many lives or not. Overall, how many books titles were nominated by those 1,000 people? Maybe only 2 books were nominated, Bible and 1984. Or maybe let's say 10 or 100 books were nominated. Okay, but it doesn't affect whether 1984, it doesn't give me definite answers to whether 1984 affected many lives or not. Fifth, how many people chose 1984? Let's say only 2-3 people mentioned 1984 versus, let's say, out of 1,000, let's say 400 mentioned 1984. Now if 400 people were affected by 1984, we can say many people affected 1984 were getting influenced by 1984. If just 1 or 2 people read it, can we say many people were influenced? No, we cannot say. So it gives me different conclusions. This is your answer. profit of X's flagship products have been declining slowly for several years. Okay, CFO investigated and determined that inflation has raised the cost of producing the product. Okay, we're talking about one particular product, but consumers were not willing to pay more than the current price. So we cannot raise the price, but the costs are increasing. So that means the profitability of that particular product is going down. As a result, CFO recommended that the company stop producing the product because he wants only those products whose profits are increasing, profit margins are increasing. Okay, so CFO has to make a decision. So which question would be most useful in making a decision? That means different scenarios or opposite scenarios of that particular question will lead to opposite conclusions by the CFO, opposite decisions by the CFO. Does the company have new and profitable products available with which to replace flagship product? Again, just focus on the conclusion of the argument or the decision to be made. The CEO says remove products whose profit margins are not increasing. Okay, so does the company have products available which can replace the flagship product? Let's say two scenarios in which one we have and another we don't have. So in the scenario when we don't have a new flagship product, now the CFO is not talking about replacing, okay, or changing only those products which can be replaced. It simply says if the profit margins are not increasing, remove it. Whether we can replace it or not, that's not even a question. What percentage of company's excess revenues is represented by sale of flagship product in the question? Let's say this product is contributing huge percentage, let's say more than 50% to the company's overall sales. But again, we're talking about profit margins. So it doesn't tell me whether profit margins are lesser or bigger. Are there additional features which can be added to the product and for which consumers might be willing to pay a higher price? This is out because it says consumers are not willing to pay more than the current price. Will the rest of the company X's management team agree with the CFO's recommendation? Again, out. It doesn't tell me whether profit margins would be lesser or more. Is there a way to alter manufacturing or distribution processes in order to reduce the cost of production? Now, if we can reduce the cost of production, we can increase profits and we can keep up with that product. But if the answer is no, we cannot reduce the cost, then profit cannot be reduced and the decision would be to altogether eliminate that product. Okay, so we'll arrive at different conclusions by this option. Sucking zinc lozenges has been promoted as a treatment for common cold. Research has revealed no consistent effect. Okay. However, zinc gel applied nasally has been shown to greatly reduce the duration of colds. Since the gel contains zinc in the same form and concentration as the lozenges, the greater effectiveness of the gel must be due to the fact that cold viruses tend to concentrate in nose, not in mouth. So gel is more effective compared with the lozenges. Okay, reason for that is there are more concentration of the virus in nose compared with that of mouth. So this is one explanation why gel might be more effective. Okay, so can we have an option that can give me different explanation or different conclusion why gel is more effective? Let's see. Whether zinc is effective only against colds or also has an effect on virally caused diseases. Let's take yes and no two cases. The zinc is more effective on other virally caused diseases or zinc is not more effective. It doesn't tell me the difference between gel and lozenges. Out. whether the remedies that do not contain zinc but when taken orally can reduce. Again, it doesn't tell me difference between gel and lozenges. So there has to be the option which will compare the two. The people who frequently catch cold have a zinc deficiency? No. I mean, both the items have same concentration and same form of zinc. Okay. So again, it doesn't tell me why gel is more effective. Whether either the zinc gel or lozenges contain ingredients that have an impact on the activity of the zinc. Now, let's say yes and no cases. Yes case, one of them has certain ingredients over other that have an impact on the activity of the zinc. So how zinc will act on the disease will get affected by this. Okay. And if, I mean, any one of them doesn't have anything extra, so the only reason could be that they are more in nose than in mouth. So you can get two different reasoning behind why gel or could be more effective or lozenges could be less effective. Okay. That's right. Whether zinc gel has an effect on the severity of cold symptoms as well as other duration, again, it doesn't tell me difference between gel and lozenges. This is out. In a certain wildlife park rangers are able to track the movements of many rhinos because those animals wear radio collars. Okay, when, as often happens, the collar slips off, it's put back on. Putting a collar on rhinos involves immobilizing the animal by shooting it with a tranquilizer. Okay. The female rhino that have been frequently recollared have significant lower fertility, so probably that is because of the tranquilizer. So low fertility among females that have been recollared many times, so they are given more tranquilizer, and tranquilizer decreases the fertility, it affects the fertility. So is it the reason or the cause for this or not? So whether there are more collared female rhino than uncollared female rhinos in the park. Now let's say there are more collared rhinos in that. So it doesn't tell me that the reason for low fertility is because of this tranquilizer. Okay, and whether there are less collared females, again, it doesn't affect. I mean, it says the collared one have lesser fertility, so it doesn't talk about the numbers compared with collared versus non-collared. Okay, so we are not comparing the low collar versus more collared female rhinos. Okay, it's not a distinction, it's not a comparison between the two. It says it's low fertility. What could be the reason for that? Out. How the tranquilizer that is used for immobilizing rhinos differs, if at all, from tranquilizers used in working with other large mammals. Again, we are not comparing. Okay, it will not give me two different answers. It will not give me the different reason as to why tranquilizer is the cause of low fertility or not. How often park rangers need to use tranquilizer dart to immobilize for reasons other than attaching radio collars? Now, if the answer is, let's say, they don't use for other purposes, that means the tranquilizer is used more on the more collared females. That means this could be the only reason why they are getting low fertility, versus, let's say, it's used very often, the tranquilizer, in situations other than attaching radio collars. That means the other females who don't have radio collars, they might also be given tranquilizers quite often. So if the fertility of those females is not getting affected, that means it's not the tranquilizer. So it gives me different reasons, different conclusions. That's our option. Whether male rhinos lose their collar any more often, again, we are not comparing male and female. whether radio collar is the only practical means that I have for tracking of movements. It doesn't tell me why the tranquilizers are affecting the fertility or not. If Morganville wants to keep its central shopping district healthy, okay, healthy means financially and economically healthy, it should prevent the opening of huge save-all discount department stores on the outskirts of Morganville. Records from other small towns show that whenever Save-All has opened a store outside the central shopping district, within 5 years the town has experienced the bankruptcies of more than a quarter of the stores. Okay, so the argument here is, if we have Save-All store, okay, we might have a lot of bankruptcies in the shopping district. So whether we should allow a Save-All store or not, that's the question. First, have community activists in other towns successfully campaigned against the opening of Save-All store? Whether they campaign or not doesn't affect the bankruptcy of the stores. For example, or what we are saying is Save-All affecting the other stores or not is not directed by the campaigning against it or not. Do a large percentage of residents of Morganville currently do almost all of their shopping at stores in Morganville? Let's say yes and no, two cases. Yes, all of the residents, they do shopping from the store in Morganville. So can we say a majority of them will shift to the stores or the Save-All store? We cannot say. And let's say no, they do not do shopping from the stores in Morganville. Again, it doesn't tell me whether the shops in the district will be going to bankruptcy or not. In towns with healthy central shopping districts, what proportion of the stores in those districts suffer bankruptcy during a typical 5-year period? Again, take yes and no cases. I mean, a lot of them went to bankruptcy, or none of them went to bankruptcy. So a lot of them went to bankruptcy means that irrespective of whether Save-All will come or not, okay, because the argument is based upon the reasoning that when Save-All has opened a store, the central shopping district went for bankruptcy. So it says even if Save-All is not there, they're still going for bankruptcy. That means Save-All doesn't affect. Now, if none of them went to bankruptcy, that means Save-All is responsible for bankruptcy. So that means we should avoid Save-All. So that's your answer. What proportion of the employees at the Save-All store at the outskirts of Morganville will be drawn from Morganville? It talks about employees, really doesn't affect. Had it been customers, then we'd have, it would have made any sense. Do newly opened Save-All stores ever lose money during their first 5 years of operation? We're talking about Save-All, whether it's losing money or making money. It doesn't really correlate directly with whether the shopping district will be fine or not.